I have always considered myself a rational man, someone who builds companies on logic, speed, and decisive judgment, but when it came to Sophia Bennett, all of that collapsed into pure emotion because this girl wasn't just my girlfriend, she was like a kitten that had learned to walk on two legs, clingy, soft, obedient, and endlessly affectionate, and she had been mine for 3 years, living with me for 2, fitting into my life so perfectly that it almost felt like we were an old married couple. And yet, there was still a childlike sweetness in her voice every time she called me brother, her favorite way of addressing me that somehow never lost its charm even though it should have sounded strange coming from a girl who was, by all standards, a grown woman. Sophia was 3 years younger than me, around 5 feet 7 inches, slim, with a kind of beauty that struck people as both innocent and stunning, the kind of girl who would blush the first time you kissed her cheek but would then cling to you with an intensity that was impossible to shake off. And every evening when I came home from work, she would greet me with an apron still tied around her waist, pretending to be a little housewife, rushing to take my bag from my hand, lifting her big wet eyes to mine, whispering how much she missed me after just one day apart, and every time I'd pull her close, bury her head in my shoulder, teasing her about embarrassing my assistant Mia Lopez who, without fail, would avert her eyes politely, place my briefcase by the shoe rack, and slip out of the apartment as if she had just witnessed something too intimate for words, but I didn't care because I loved showing off our affection, or as Sophia liked to call it, feeding dog food, to everyone around us. She said it with a pout, insisting that she needed the world to know that I was hers and hers alone, and I couldn't deny the flicker of pride that came with seeing her so possessive, her insecure little cat heart so easily soothed. Whenever I reminded her that she was my favorite girl in the entire world, the only one who could brighten my day after hours of board meetings, the only one who could soften my sharp edges just by sitting on my lap and whining into my ear, but as perfect as our relationship seemed, the world around us didn't see it that way, and despite living together, despite 3 years of loyalty, despite the fact that she cooked for me, cleaned for me, supported me like the ideal partner, rumors still flew around the New York business circle. People whispered behind my back that Sophia Bennett was just a canary I kept in a gilded cage, a pretty little thing I spoiled for fun until I got bored, and even some of my long-term business partners had dropped hints, asking when I planned to change things up, their words carrying that disgusting insinuation that Sophia wasn't a real partner but some replaceable accessory. And every time I heard it I wanted to smash a glass against the wall because they didn't know her the way I did, they didn't see the way she clung to me at night, they didn't feel the warmth of her small hands massaging my temples after a long day, they didn't hear her childish but sincere love letters she once wrote when she first chased me, filling my inbox and even my office desk with corny poetry until I finally caved and gave her a chance. No, they only saw a surface, and I hated that surface was all they cared about, which was why one night, while we sat together eating the dinner she cooked and I noticed the absence of a ring on her delicate finger, the thought crashed into my head like lightning: why not just propose, why not shut everyone's mouth once and for all and tell the entire world that Sophia Bennett wasn't some little pet but my fiancée, the woman I planned to marry and spend my life with. The idea wouldn't leave me, it clung to me as tightly as she did. So I immediately began making plans in secret, lying to her that I had a sudden business trip, moving out for a few days so I could prepare the perfect surprise, calling Mia to help me with arrangements, and even buying a villa just so I could set the stage for the proposal because when I did it, I wanted it to be unforgettable, something she could never doubt. But the truth was, I wasn't patient enough to order a custom ring and wait months for it, not when I was itching to see her shocked, tearful face as I knelt down. So instead I decided to attend a private auction in Manhattan, where I knew luxury jewelry pieces would be displayed, especially since I had heard that the so-called eldest princess of the New York elite circle would also be present and the organizers had prepared their finest treasures to impress her, meaning the auctions would be flawless. And with that plan set, I told Sophia I'd be away, left our shared home, and threw myself into preparations with the same determination I usually reserved for closing million-dollar deals. I even swapped to a new car on the day of the auction to avoid any chance of her spotting me on the street and unraveling my lie, and when I finally stepped into that banquet hall before the auction began, I kept to the shadows, reviewing the catalog of items, noting which ones would suit her best, picturing the diamond glinting on her hand as she whispered yes, and right then my phone buzzed with a message that almost melted my heart: "Brother, when will you come back?" I miss you so much, followed by a kitten emoji, and I smiled at the screen like a fool, typing back that I missed her too and that I'd be home soon with a big surprise, though I stopped short of sending that last part because I wanted her to experience it live, not in text, and when she replied instantly with another string of kitten emojis and a promise to wait at home like the good girl she was, I nearly laughed out loud in the middle of the banquet, forcing myself to swallow the grin so no one would think I'd lost it. Everything felt so perfectly aligned, every step of my plan leading toward the happiest night of our lives, and I thought nothing could go wrong until a scream split the room, drawing my eyes upward, and there across the hall, surrounded by a circle of admirers, dressed in an elegant evening gown that exuded nobility and untouchable power stood Sophia Bennett, my sweet little kitten, looking nothing like the clingy girl who just texted me minutes ago but instead like a queen descending from the heavens, her face cold as ice as she ignored a man sprawled on the floor before her, a man who had clearly dared to offend her, while those around her rushed to defend her honor, loudly proclaiming, "This is the eldest princess of our New York circle. Who do you think you are to approach her?" And in that instant my world tilted because the two images in my head, me gentle kitten at home and this regal woman everyone called princess, smashed together in a way I couldn't comprehend, leaving me gripping my phone in disbelief, praying that maybe I was mistaken, that maybe it was just someone who looked like her, until the sound of a notification chimed in her hand at the exact same moment my phone showed she was online, and my denial crumbled, replaced by the cold truth that the girl I loved, the girl I planned to propose to, was not who I thought she was, and the eldest princess of the New York elite was none other than my Sophia Bennett. For a long moment I just stood there frozen, my mind completely blank, staring at Sophia Bennett as if she were a stranger because the woman before me bore no resemblance to the clingy kitten who pouted in my arms every night and bombarded me with sweet texts full of emojis. No, this woman radiated a cold authority that made everyone around her lower their heads in deference, her icy gaze sweeping across the crowd like she owned the place, which in a way, she did, because everyone whispered that she was the eldest princess of New York's elite, a title I had always assumed belonged to some untouchable heiress I would never cross paths with, yet now here she was, the girl I lived with, the girl I cooked breakfast with, the girl who wrapped herself around me like a little koala every time we slept, and I couldn't reconcile the two versions no matter how hard I tried. Anger burned in my chest, not the kind of explosive fury that makes you shout but the deep, suffocating kind that makes your hands shake as you hide in the shadows, realizing that for 3 years you've been the one kept in the dark, the fool in a play you didn't even know existed, and while she smiled at her phone with that same softness she reserved only for me, ignoring the trembling man who had dared cross her, I understood with brutal clarity that my Sophia wasn't just some ordinary girl who had fallen in love with me at a graduation speech. She was a Bennett, the very Bennett of the family I'd heard rumors about since I first entered the corporate world. The family whispered to have old money roots, cutthroat boardroom tactics, and a reputation for chewing up rivals, a family everyone claimed was declining until their mysterious daughter suddenly appeared and turned everything around, and now it made sense why she never talked about her parents, why she brushed off any questions about her background, why she always said she came from a messy family, and left it at that because if I had known the truth, maybe I would have treated her differently. Maybe I would have been intimidated, maybe I would have second-guessed her sincerity, but instead she had played the role of my sweet kitten so convincingly that even I, someone who prided himself on being able to sniff out lies in a room full of executives, had been utterly fooled. My fingers tightened around my phone as I reread her last message, "Brother, I miss you." And I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, laugh and cry at the same time because just minutes earlier I had been picking out rings to propose to her, believing I was about to give her the greatest surprise of her life, but the real surprise was mine, and it was cruel, a twist I never saw coming, and as I stood there drinking wine after wine to numb the sting in my chest, I kept asking myself, what was real, what was fake, was the kitten who clung to me at home the disguise, or was this icy princess standing tall before me the mask, and did it even matter anymore because both were her, two sides of Sophia Bennett, two faces I could no longer separate. When the auction began I couldn't stop myself from watching her every move, sitting in her private VIP box, casually raising her number to bid on luxury items as if money meant nothing, her expression never changing, cold and elegant, and something inside me snapped. A dark urge rising up that whispered if she wanted to play games, then I'd play too, so every time she bid on an item, I raised the price higher, deliberately opposing her again and again, watching as people in the hall started to whisper, realizing someone was going head-to-head with the eldest princess, something no one ever dared to do, and though rationally I knew it was childish, knew I was throwing away money just to spite her, I couldn't stop myself because I wanted her to feel even an ounce of the frustration I felt. I wanted to see that perfect mask of hers crack, even if just for a moment, and finally. After 7 rounds of me driving up her prices, the organizer himself, Mr. Johnson, came to my box looking pale and sweaty, holding out a fruit plate like it was a peace offering, begging me to stop because the guest upstairs was Miss Bennet and he didn't want any conflict, but I only sneered, telling him to relax, that I wouldn't ruin his little auction, that I had already spent enough to vent my anger and would let it go for now, though inside I knew this was far from over, because no fruit plate or polite excuse could erase the fact that my girlfriend had hidden her entire identity from me, and no amount of wine could wash away the bitter taste in my mouth. By the time I stumbled out of the auction hall that night, clutching the ring I had absent-mindedly bought in the middle of my anger, my head buzzed with too many questions and not enough answers, and when Chloe Parker, that arrogant blonde who had earlier tried to defend Sophia, suddenly blocked my path with her smug little sneer, accusing me of being just another social climber who wanted to latch onto the Bennet name, I almost laughed in her face, because if only she knew how ridiculous that sounded, if only she knew that I had already been with Sophia for years, that I knew her quirks, her habits, her favorite foods, her most vulnerable expressions, things no outsider could ever imagine, but I was too exhausted to argue, too angry to defend myself. So I brushed past her with a promise that one day it would be Sophia begging to see me, not the other way around, and left her gaping behind me. Yet even as I returned home days later, the anger hadn't dulled, the betrayal hadn't lessened, and when Sophia came running to the door like always, her eyes lighting up as she reached for me, I couldn't bring myself to embrace her like before, couldn't bring myself to pretend nothing had changed, because everything had changed. I had seen her standing there in that gown, seen the way people bowed to her, seen the ruthless edge she kept hidden from me, and now every time she called me brother, in that sweet, coquettish voice, all I could hear was the cold echo of princess ringing in my ears, a reminder that for 3 years I hadn't been dating just any girl, I had been dating Sophia Bennet, the heir of the Bennet family, the queen of New York's business circle, and she had chosen to keep that truth from me until fate ripped her mask away. When I finally walked back into the apartment after days of deliberately staying away, Sophia rushed toward me like a loyal puppy, her arms open, her voice soft and needy as she called out, "Brother, I missed you so much," but instead of melting like I usually did, I stepped aside, letting her hug fall into empty air, and the look of confusion on her face almost broke me, almost made me forget the fury and betrayal simmering in my chest, but I forced myself to keep my distance because if I gave in so easily, then what was the point of the last few sleepless nights I had spent replaying the scene at the auction in my mind over and over again, watching her stand there like a queen while I sat in the shadows like a fool. So I changed my shoes slowly, brushed past her, and sank onto the sofa, rubbing my temples as if the headache came from work instead of her deception, and for a moment the apartment was so quiet it hurt, her voice trembling as she sat down beside me, still trying to cling to that old routine by calling me brother again, her tone laced with a plea, but I pretended not to hear, letting the word hang between us like a ghost. Finally I broke the silence with a story, my voice casual, almost lazy, as I said a friend of mine had been dating someone for years only to find out she'd been hiding her family and identity the whole time, asking her what she thought of that. And I could feel her body stiffen beside me, her small hands pausing where they had been gently kneading my shoulders, and for a moment I thought she'd confess, thought she'd finally say something, but instead she forced a smile and whispered, "What's wrong with that? If he has a good background and hides it, maybe he just didn't know how to say it later," and I almost laughed at how quickly she spun her excuse, how easily she tried to dodge the truth, but the way she pressed her forehead against mine, eyes wide and shimmering as she promised, "I would never lie to my brother," almost disarmed me again, almost made me forget. And that was the most dangerous part about Sophia Bennet. She knew exactly how to wrap me around her finger, how to use her tears and her fragile tone to soften my resolve, but this time I couldn't let myself be fooled, this time I had to keep pressing, even if it meant suffocating under the weight of my own doubts, so I started testing her more, making excuses to stay at the company overnight, ignoring her attempts to hug me, watching her reaction every time I pulled away, and each time she clung harder, each time she drank more than she usually would, showing up at my office one night drunk out of her mind, red-faced and tearful as she blocked Mia at the front desk, slurring, "Does brother not like me anymore? Am I too annoying? Is that why he's been hiding from me?" And the moment I saw her swaying there, desperate and pitiful, my anger cracked, my heart twisting painfully because no matter how furious I was, no matter how much I wanted to punish her for hiding the truth, I couldn't deny that she was still the same kitten who curled up beside me every night. The same girl who had once written me a love poem every single day for 6 months straight until I finally caved, so I stepped forward and steadied her, and when she realized it was me, she threw her arms around my waist like she was drowning, repeating, "Brother, brother, brother," over and over again as if the word itself could keep me from slipping away, and I had no choice but to pat her back, whispering that I didn't hate her, that I was just too busy with work, pointing at the stacks of reports in my office to prove my excuse, and her eyes lit up instantly, like a cat finally reassured it hadn't been abandoned, and in that moment I hated myself for being so weak, hated how easily she could pierce through my anger with one pitiful smile, but I still carried her upstairs, still let her fall asleep in my arms, telling myself it was only because she was drunk, only because she needed me, not because I was forgiving her. But the tests didn't stop, the tension between us only grew worse in the days that followed, because while she tried to act normal cooking, cleaning, sending me those clingy texts with emojis as if nothing had changed, I kept watching her every move with suspicion, throwing out questions that sounded harmless but were meant to corner her, and though she pretended not to notice, I could see the flickers of panic in her eyes each time, the way her fingers tightened around her phone, the way her lips trembled before she forced herself to smile, and I knew she was terrified that I had figured it out, terrified that the perfect little world she had built with me was crumbling. Still, she kept trying, sending me more gifts, clinging harder, showing up at the office with takeout when she knew I'd be working late, and yet I kept her at arm's length, punishing her with my coldness while secretly dying inside because every time she reached for me I wanted nothing more than to pull her into my lap and kiss away her insecurities, but I held back because I needed her to understand that hiding something this big wasn't forgivable, that it wasn't just about family or background, it was about trust, about the fact that I had built my entire relationship with her on the belief that she was honest with me when in reality she had been wearing a mask the whole time, and no matter how much I loved her, I couldn't let that slide without consequences. Finally the breaking point came when I pushed a deal with a suspicious tech company just to see how far she would go, just to see if she would expose herself to stop me, and when she did, when she showed up in her other face, the cold, commanding Sophia Bennett of the Bennett family, suspicions were confirmed, and I realized I had backed her into a corner where she could no longer hide, but that confrontation, that revelation, belonged to the next act, and as I lay awake at night with her curled against me like nothing was wrong, whispering in her sleep and clutching my shirt with her small hands, I knew the storm between us was only getting started, that the gap between the kitten I loved and the princess I couldn't forgive was growing wider by the day. And sooner or later, one of us was going to break. The tension between us finally reached a point where subtle tests and evasive smiles weren't enough, and I knew the only way to tear down the last of Sophia's mask was to push her into a corner she couldn't escape. So when a shady foreign tech company came dangling a too-good-to-be-true deal in front of me, I saw my chance, because from the moment I reviewed their proposal I could tell it reeked of recycled technology and fake promises, the kind of scam that would collapse the moment anyone with half a brain looked closer. But instead of rejecting them outright, I staged an entire show, feigning interest, discussing partnership terms, even bragging at home about how much I wanted the deal just to watch Sophia squirm, because deep down I knew she would never let me walk into a trap that could tarnish my company's name, not when she secretly controlled an empire of her own. So I strung her along, watching as she tried and failed to hide her anxiety, asking me questions about the project in that soft, careful way, reminding me that sometimes opportunities that looked perfect were actually too coincidental, urging me to slow down, and every time she brought it up, I brushed her off coldly with a "you don't understand business," watching her lips tremble before she forced herself to nod, and as much as it hurt to see her look at me with those wet eyes, I had to keep going, because this was bigger than hurt feelings. This was about trust, about ripping away the facade once and for all. So I went to the company with Mia one afternoon, scheduled a meeting the day before the final bid, and as expected, Sophia showed up unannounced, striding into the conference room not as my clingy little girlfriend but as Sophia Bennett, heir of the Bennett family, her expression sharp, her voice calm as ice as she told me in front of the stunned executives, "Brother, there's something wrong with this company." And in that moment every excuse she had ever given me, every vague answer, every blushing dodge finally shattered, leaving only the truth hanging between us, undeniable, unavoidable. I didn't answer her right away, instead turning to the so-called tech innovators across the table, my lips curving into a smile as I revealed their game, calling out the outdated technology they were trying to pass off as new, pointing toward the sirens outside as police stormed in to arrest them, and when the chaos cleared, I looked back at Sophia, her proud mask slipping for just a second as she stared at me, panic in her eyes, and I realized I had forced her hand, dragged her into the open, and now she had no choice but to confess. Later, when the room was empty and it was just us, she tried to take my hand, her voice soft, "When did you find out, brother?" And I laughed bitterly, asking, "Find out what? That my sweet little kitten was actually the eldest princess of New York? Or that I've been dating someone who never trusted me enough to tell me the truth?" And she flinched, her hand tightening on my sleeve as she rushed out. "I'm sorry, I didn't hide it because I wanted to lie, I hid it because 2 years ago the family was in chaos, people wanted me dead, I had to protect myself, and when I met you, I didn't want you to be dragged into it, I thought if I stayed quiet, if I just loved you, it would be enough." And her words almost broke me because I could see the sincerity in her eyes, could feel how desperately she wanted me to understand, but the anger I'd buried for weeks erupted, because it wasn't about her reasons, it was about the fact that she chose for me, that she decided I wasn't worthy of the truth. So I snapped, telling her that when your partner hides something this big, it doesn't feel like protection, it feels like betrayal, it makes you anxious, insecure, scared, and I wasn't some fragile flower who needed her to shield me. I was a man who had built everything with my own hands, and I deserved honesty, not pity, not half truths. And if she thought I was making a fuss, then she was free to walk away, but if she wanted to stay, she had to understand that I would retaliate for every lie she fed me. She bit her lip, her proud posture collapsing as she whispered, "I understand," and for a moment silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating, until I turned away, because as much as I loved her, as much as I wanted to pull her into my arms and forgive everything, I couldn't, not yet, maybe not ever. And so the very next day I packed my things and moved out of our apartment, leaving her standing in the doorway with her phone clutched to her chest, her messages flooding my screen afterward, filled with, "Brother, please, I'm sorry, I love you," over and over, but I didn't reply, not once, because I needed her to feel what it was like to be shut out, to be left in the dark, to taste even a fraction of the emptiness she had given me for 3 years. Still, even as I sat alone in a rented hotel room, staring at the ring I had bought, my chest ached, because no matter how much I told myself I was punishing her, no matter how much I wanted to believe I could walk away, the truth was I couldn't. I was tied to her in a way that went deeper than pride or anger, and the sight of her cold queenly figure flickering against the memory of her kitten-like smile haunted me, a contradiction I couldn't reconcile, and I knew that sooner or later, either she would break completely or I would, but this war between us was far from finished. The days after I moved out were a blur of silence and noise, silence because I refused to reply to any of Sophia's endless messages that kept popping up on my phone, each one a variation of, "Brother, I'm sorry, I miss you, please come home," and noise because the entire New York elite circle suddenly seemed to know that their so-called eldest princess was chasing after a man she had wronged. Her name and mine constantly linked together in business gossip and social feeds, every headline screaming about how Sophia Bennett was publicly pursuing her boyfriend after being caught hiding her identity, and while I never confirmed or denied anything, I couldn't escape the spectacle she created. Every day flowers arrived at my office, sometimes a single rose from an old woman who'd knock on my car window, sometimes a huge bouquet hand-delivered by Chloe Parker, the same blonde who once sneered at me but now looked like she'd been forced into Sophia's service as an unwilling messenger. Muttering apologies for ever doubting me before running away like a kicked puppy, and sometimes even Mia, my assistant, would show up during her vacation carrying roses with an exasperated smile, telling me that although Sophia drove her crazy with all the brother this, brother that, she still admired the way Sophia loved me, that it wasn't coercion or manipulation. Just a stubborn girl who had decided she would love me forever no matter what. At first I laughed bitterly at these stunts. Crumpling the notes she left hidden in the petals, notes written in the same childish handwriting as the love letters she used to woo me years ago, repeating the same silly lines but always ending with one new sentence: a kitten is a kitten, and it will love you forever. And though I tried to stay cold, tried to tell myself this was nothing more than her way of smoothing things over, something inside me softened a little each time, the edges of my anger dulling as I realized she wasn't trying to use her family power or wealth to win me back. She wasn't leaning on the Bennett name or sending lawyers or board members to beg for her. She was simply retracing the exact steps she'd taken when she first chased me, like we had gone back in time and she was once again the girl in a white dress who slipped into my office with a corny poem and a lunchbox, except now the entire city was watching, and that sincerity, foolish and reckless as it was, started to chip away at my walls. The real breaking point came during my alma mater's anniversary celebration, when I returned to give a speech as an outstanding graduate, only to walk in late because my car broke down, and as I slipped into the auditorium, I looked up at the stage and there she was, Sophia Bennett, the cold eldest princess of New York, standing at the podium giving a speech of her own, but when her eyes found mine in the crowd, her frosty mask melted into the same shy smile I had seen the first time we met, the smile that had hooked me before I even realized it. And as the students around me started whispering, she answered the moderator's scripted question about her dreams by saying casually, "Does wanting to be my senior's kitten count?" And the entire hall erupted with cheers and laughter, everyone turning to stare at me, waiting for my reaction, and I buried my face in my hand, half embarrassed, half amused, because only Sophia could turn a serious event into a public love confession and get away with it. Afterward, when my turn came to speak, she sat in the front row, looking up at me with her chin propped on her hand, imitating the way I had looked at her minutes before, and for a second I forgot about everything, the lies, the anger, the games, and only saw the girl who had once written me a poem about stars because she said I was the brightest one in her sky. And when the speeches ended and I stepped backstage, she was already waiting, somehow dressed in the exact same outfit she had worn when we first met, holding out her phone with a blushing face as she said, "My name is Sophia Bennett, president of the Bennett Group, can I meet you, brother?" And the ridiculousness of her reenacting our first encounter almost made me laugh, but when I scanned her QR code and another freshly written love letter popped up, my heart twisted, because it was the same childish nonsense as before, but it was real, raw, and undeniably hers. And when she whispered that because she loved me so much she felt like nothing she did was right anymore, I finally understood that all her arrogance and all her shamelessness came from fear of losing me, fear of being rejected, fear of never making up for the years she had hidden her truth. So I told her that if she truly wanted to be my kitten forever, then she had to accept that I wasn't a man who would give up his ambition or identity to be a shadow in her world. That I was Ethan Reed, CEO of my own company, a man who wanted to stand beside her as an equal, not beneath her as someone protected or pitted. And to my surprise her eyes lit up with relief, not resistance, as she said that was all she ever wanted, that she had only fought so hard in the Bennett family business because it was her mother's dying wish, and if I wanted her to give it all up tomorrow, she would. If I wanted her to have children, she would. If I didn't, she wouldn't. That as long as I wanted something, she would give it, even if it meant her entire empire. Because in her eyes nothing mattered more than being with me. Hearing that, I realized just how much she had already crossed the line for me, already given up her pride, already chased me in front of the whole city without shame, and maybe it was time I decided whether I was willing to cross back to her side, to forgive and start over, because if I kept holding on to my anger forever, then I was the one who would lose in the end. Still, as I held her hand and teased that maybe I should just take her family's entire business as payment for her lies, she only smiled and said without hesitation, "If that's what brother wants, then it's yours," and I couldn't help but laugh at how far gone she was, because if I had been a worse man, I really could have ruined her, but instead I kissed her forehead and told her the truth that what I wanted wasn't her wealth or her empire. It was the same thing she had always offered me from the very beginning, her heart, her trust, her kitten-like devotion. That no one else could ever replace. After everything, After the flowers and the letters and the shameless confessions in front of my alma mater, I thought maybe Sophia would calm down, maybe she'd give me space to decide on my own, but that wasn't her style, not anymore, because once she chose a path she ran down it without hesitation, and this time her path was me, so every day she made her presence known in the most ridiculous but sincere ways. Whether it was plastering her pursuit of me all over the New York social scene so everyone knew that the once untouchable eldest princess was chasing after her boyfriend, or sending small gifts with kitten doodles hidden inside like we were teenagers again, or even appearing at events just to watch me from the crowd with those bright eyes that refused to look away, and though I pretended to be annoyed, though I told myself I was still angry, the truth was that each gesture chipped away at the walls I had built around my heart until one day I found myself sitting in the hotel where I had planned to propose, staring at the decorations I'd never taken down, wondering if I'd been punishing her or punishing myself all this time, because no matter how hard I tried to hold on to my pride, I couldn't erase her from my life, couldn't erase the way she called me brother with that mix of sweetness and desperation, couldn't erase the way she curled into me like I was her only safe place. And as I sat there turning the ring box over in my hand, I realized that anger wasn't what kept me from giving in, it was fear that if I forgave her too easily, if I let her back in without consequence, then the cycle of lies might repeat, that one day I'd wake up and discover there was some other part of her I didn't know, but when I really thought about it, I knew there wasn't. I knew the only secret she'd ever kept was her identity, and she'd already laid that bare. Stripped herself of her pride in front of me and the entire city just to prove she still loved me, and if that wasn't enough, then nothing ever would be. The final push came on another night when my alma mater invited us both back for a celebration dinner, and after the speeches were over, after the crowd dispersed, Sophia stopped me in the same hallway where we had first crossed paths years ago, this time not hiding behind a shy smile or a white dress but standing tall as both the Sophia Bennett everyone admired and the kitten who only existed for me, and she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Brother, I don't care if you forgive me now or years from now, but I'll be here, always, because I already gave you everything, and I'll keep giving until you finally believe me," and that stubborn declaration finally broke me, because how could I keep pretending when she had already crossed the line so far she couldn't go back? How could I keep acting cold when her entire world revolved around proving her sincerity to me? So I pulled her close, pressed my forehead against hers, and told her what I should have admitted weeks ago, that I was furious, that I was hurt, but I never stopped loving her, not for a single second, and that no matter how much I wanted to stay angry, I couldn't walk away, because she wasn't just my girlfriend or the Bennett heiress, she was Sophia, my kitten, my flame, my everything, and if she could cross the storm for me, then I could forgive the rain for her. Her tears spilled instantly, soaking my shirt as she clung to me like she'd been holding her breath for months, whispering over and over that she loved me, that she'd never hide anything from me again, and as I kissed the crown of her head, I realized that this wasn't just the end of our fight, it was the start of something new, a relationship no longer built on masks or half-truths but on raw honesty, because we had already seen the ugliest sides of each other and still couldn't let go. Later that week, when she found the ring in my pocket, her eyes widened with shock, and before she could even ask, I dropped to one knee right there in the middle of our living room, no grand hotel, no staged surprise, just the two of us and the weight of everything we'd survived, and I asked her to marry me, not as punishment, not as a way to erase the past, but as a choice to move forward together, and the way she threw herself into my arms, sobbing, yes, against my lips, told me I'd made the right decision. Now when people in the business world gossip about the Bennett princess and the tech CEO, I let them talk, because they don't know what it took for us to get here. They don't know that behind the cold queen and the sharp entrepreneur are just a man and a woman who love each other in the messiest, fiercest way possible, and every time she calls me brother in that clingy little voice, I just smile, because I know that no matter what mask she wears outside, no matter how many titles or crowns the world throws at her, at the end of the day she's still my Sophia, my kitten, and the only woman I'll ever want by my side.